Thank you for joining us on American Medicine Today. I am Kimberly Bonatti, joined by Ethan Euchre.
Happy to be here.
Jeff Wagstaff.
Thank you for having me, Kimberly.
Absolutely. And world-renowned orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Alfred Bonatti. Thanks for being here. Our next guest is award-winning filmmaker who spent 30 years battling thyroid disease. She is Maggie Hadleigh-West, and her latest documentary, Sick to Death, exposes medical corruption and negligence that is rampant in the healthcare industry. Thanks for being here, Maggie.
Thanks for having me, Kimberly.
Absolutely.
Now, Maggie, there's a lot to get to here regarding your film, basically 30 years worth of a story. First, tell us why you decided to drink radioactive iodine and what happened after that.
I was diagnosed with thyroid disease, with Graves' disease, when I was 32, and I did an enormous amount of research trying to find some other alternative, and I couldn't find anything. And so finally, that's what I did. I was advised to do it, I did it, and I absolutely think it was a mistake.
I've never even heard of that as a treatment, radioactive iodine that you drink.
Well, doesn't it scare you? The thought of that just makes me cower away.
It is scary. It is scary, and it's been a standard procedure for about 75 years now. When I did do it, I was told that it wasn't a big deal. However, I would be radioactive for a few days, and I should stay away from pregnant women and flush the toilet 3 times.
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's safe for you to take. You'll be all right. Perfect.
You might turn it into a comic book supervillain, but you'll be okay.
And you'll look like a nightlight when you go to bed. But other than that, you'll be fine.
But why is it that people struggle so much with thyroid issues and they're often misdiagnosed and undertreated? How can that happen?
Well, I think what actually happens is we have had like a perfect storm of events. One was the TSH test was developed in the 50s or 60s. At about the same time, Synthroid appeared on the market. And so doctors no longer had to recognize the signs or the symptoms because they believed that all they had to do was use this simple test, which only measures the thyroid hormone level in your pituitary. So they forgot what it looked like or what it sounded like. And then there became this prescription drug available that knocked out the prior drug, which was working perfectly well. And people, if they were lucky enough to get diagnosed, usually got put on a drug that was ineffective.
You said, they weren't paying attention to signs or symptoms. What would be signs and symptoms of thyroid disease? Because I'm not aware.
I don't even know what the thyroid does.
Me.
That's how ignorant I am.
So the thyroid is a gland in your neck, and you need thyroid hormone in every cell, every organ in your body. Okay. And so because of that, you can have a ton of symptoms and signs. So some of the physical signs are thinning hair, not a lot of hair on the outer part of the eyebrow. It can be yellow palms or a shortened fifth digit. Okay. It can be excess weight. There are some very obvious signs. And then the symptoms are things along the line of cold hands, cold feet, depression, the inability to lose weight, brain fog is a big problem.
Okay.
There's a multitude of symptoms that come along with thyroid disease.
Not to be funny here, but I am going to joke because everyone's looking at me and I'm starting to giggle slightly only because I'm always freezing. So when do you know that that's a problem versus being a typical female that may be cold?
Actually, typical female that are cold, invariably it's a low thyroid.
Okay.
And unfortunately, women are often more symptomatic than men. Men generally present with depression, but women generally have a whole host of other symptoms. But that is a classic sign. But on my website, which is sick2death.com, there is the basal body temperature test, which you can take a thermometer, put it by your bed, take your temperature in the morning, and see if your thyroid is running low or if it's running high. But typically, if you're cold, your thyroid is running low. And it is at epidemic proportions for a lot of reasons. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if your thyroid was underactive.
Wow. And so what can happen if it's underactive?
In the movie, I explore through a whole preponderance of patients and experts all kinds of things that can happen.
Okay.
If you have untreated thyroid disease, you are much more susceptible to other illnesses like autoimmune diseases, or infectious diseases or even cancer and heart attacks. If it's treated, you are less likely to go in that direction.
Interesting.
Now, Maggie, you talk about in your film, Sick to Death, about medical corruption, pharmaceutical greed. Explain what you mean by that and how you uncovered it.
Just as chemotherapy owns the business of cancer, Synthroid and levothyroxine drugs own the business of thyroid disease. So what ends up happening for somebody like me, it wasn't until I was 52 years old that I even heard about natural desiccated thyroid. And when I heard about that, which is made from natural pig thyroid hormone, and took it, it felt so much better in my body. That is the drug that was around from the 1890s until Synthroid came into the market. But what happens is the pharmaceutical sponsor the American Thyroid Association. They sponsor events. They sponsor the FDA. They sponsor the AMA. They have their hands in all the major medical associations as well as the schools. So in this particular case, what happened was with the American Thyroid Association, they issued guidelines saying that if a patient is diagnosed with thyroid disease and they take a levothyroxine drug, which will undertreat 90% of people, and if that patient continues to be symptomatic, then they need a mental health referral. And, in fact, doctors that prescribe outside of their protocol can lose their licenses.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's really obscene because we should have the right to be able to figure out what is the best thing for our bodies.
Is anything being done to change the system and the way things are done?
From my perspective, my movie Sick to Death is the beginning of this. You know, there's a large patient advocacy movement, and in the course of the movie, I am making connections between the illness and the associations and the governing medical bodies, and with the idea that we can build some momentum and make some changes. So the intention is to change medical practices initially through information.
Big pharma and the big money influences really affect healthcare.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Maggie, I got a quick question for you. Brittany Padley, our social media manager, she's in the control room over here and didn't want to come in and ask the question. She texted it to me. Apparently, she has hypothyroidism and is taking levothyroxine. I know I'm not saying that right.
Levothyroxine.
Okay, she says, but she doesn't seem to be any different. So how does somebody get better?
That's a classic kind of a circumstance, and also the circumstance that I was in. I took levothyroxine for 20 years. So your thyroid gland produces two primary hormones. It produces T4, and if you're healthy, it converts the T4 to T3, which is considered the active hormone, and that's what your body needs. If you have the autoimmune version of thyroid disease, which 90% of people do, your body cannot convert T4 to T3. All of the levothyroxine drugs are only T4. So they are automatically not going to work competently for most people.
So what can you do to convert to that T3 that sounds so important?
What you can do is go to my website, click on the link that says Find a Doctor Who Gets It, and there's a whole body of listings through an organization called Thyroid Change of doctors who will prescribe natural desiccated thyroid or T3, compounded time-release T3, and you just have to start trying other medications. And the dosing is another problem because in the past, they used to dose according to how a patient feels. But because it's so rare for doctors to touch bodies or to trust the patient's mind anymore, they dose almost specifically on the labs, which is why you have to find a doctor that really understands thyroid disease.
That is so scary that they're still prescribing stuff they know isn't going to treat the problem. I'm sorry, we're out of time, but thank you so much. Maggie Hadleigh-West and her latest documentary, Sick to Death, that exposes medical corruption and negligence that is rampant in the healthcare industry.
Perfect. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got it.